everyone. Myself Supriya Konda, working as an assistant professor in civil department from Walchand Institute of Technology, Solapur. So today's class we are going to discuss on ventilation. These are the learning outcomes. At the end of this session, students will be able to impart the knowledge of ventilation and the functional requirements of the ventilation system. So ventilation, it can be defined as a process of removing or supplying the air by natural or the mechanical means to and from a air source or any space. So actually ventilation is defined in other words as a removal or supplying the fresh air from outside the building and to remove the contaminated air inside the building which is affected due to the bacteria or due to the odors, the moisture. So it has to be removed by the ventilation. So actually sufficient ventilation is essential to maintain the temperature limits inside the building and outside the building. So as it may cause the perspiration and the humidity. So next, even when on the other hand, if you see a poor ventilated room, it may cause a lack of discomfort to the occupants of the building who are actually using that building. So that poor ventilation, it may be due to the temperature increase in the temperature limits, which may be which depends upon the outer conditions where actually the building is existing. So next, even if you see a ventilated room, an unventilated room, actually it causes the lack of discomfort and uneasy conditions to the occupants of the people who are occupying. So actually the unventilated room, it leads to lack of headache, the inattentiveness, and even laziness. It can create laziness also. So that point has to be taken into consideration. So that may be due to the increase in the dust quantity, and it may be due to the increase in the carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and it may lead to the lack of sweating also, the humidity also. So that point has to be considered. So actually ventilation, it has to be taken into granted. So it actually depends upon the size of the room, and before that the purpose of the building for which it is designed. So that point has to be considered. So depending upon that, the ventilation system has to be designed. In that we have different types of the systems, that is the natural system and the mechanical system, and even the building for what purpose it is designed. Depending upon that, the ventilation system has to be provided. So even the size of the room, it matters in the ventilation. So number of windows and the doors has to be provided to avoid the contaminated air to enter inside, and even the fresh air, it has to be supplied to a room. So actually it depends upon the age of the occupants and even the number of the occupants who are actually using the building, and these are the factors which are to be considered while designing the ventilation system. And even the outdoor, where the building is actually situated, that point has to be taken into consideration. So importance of the ventilation. So it prevents an undue concentration of the body odors, the fumes, dust, and the other industrial product. And next, it prevents an undue concentration of the bacteria which are carrying the particles, and it removes the products of the combustion, and in some cases it removes the body heat and the heat liberated by the operation of the electrical and the mechanical equipment. So actually the heat which is liberated due to the operation of the mechanical equipment or any machines, that can be easily removed due to the ventilation system. So even due to the ventilation, it creates the healthy and comfortable living conditions to the occupants, and actually it takes place, the air movements or the air changes continuously takes place in the room due to the ventilation, and even the temperature limits also can be maintained inside the building. So this is the importance of the ventilation. So the functional requirements of the ventilation system. So the following are the functional requirements. The first is the rate of the supply of the fresh air, and second is the air movements or the air changes, third temperature of the air, and humidity, and finally we have the purity of the air. So rate of the supply of the fresh air. So actually the quantity of the fresh air to be supplied to a room depends upon the use of the building to which it is subjected. So that's what the temperature limits between the inside and the outside of the building has to be maintained. So the air which has to, the quantity of the air which is to be supplied to a room during summer, it has to be cool and it should be warm in a winter. So that care has to be taken. And when the velocity of the incoming air is high, that means the temperature it should not be lower than the room temperature. So that factor has to be considered. And even the quantity of the fresh air, actually with the air which is needed for the breathing, other than that the quantity of the air which is essential to survive, that air has to be maintained and it has to be supplied to a room. And actually the rate of supply of the fresh air, it depends upon the number of the occupants who are actually using, and even the age of the occupants, that is also a factor which has to be needed, and the purpose of the building for which it is designed. And next is the air movements or the air changes. So the air movements, you can see at the places of the working there is a continuous movement of the air. Actually it causes the proper ventilation of the space. So in the industries and all, you can see there is a continuous movement of the working. So number of people go on walking, and even the equipments, electrical machines, they are continuously replaced from one place to the other. And even over there the ventilation system has to be provided. And in that case you can see the industries are located outskirts of the cities, and due to that the air movements continuously takes place over there. So the temperature of the air. So it is desirable that the incoming air for the ventilation should be cool in summer and it should be warm in winter before it enters the room. So this is the main factor which has to be considered. So the difference between the inside and the outside of the building, the difference, it should not be more than 8 degrees Celsius. So that is what the location of the building has to be taken into consideration, where actually the building is located, and even the surrounding area how it is. And actually it should not contain any odors or moistures, bacteria and all. So that point has to be noticed. So whatever the air which will be transferred to the room, it should be cool in summer and it should be warm in winter. So next is the purity of the air. The purity of the air, it plays a significant role in the comfort of the people affected by the ventilation system. So actually the purity, the due to the supply of the fresh air to the room, the occupants of the building, they will be not affected by the contaminated air. And even the quantity of the air which is supplied to a room, it depends upon the temperature limits. And even the maximum and the minimum rate of the supply of the fresh air, it has to be minimum. So actually the minimum and the maximum rate of supply of the fresh air to a room are per hour are 1 and 60 respectively. And even the purity of the air, it has to be depend upon the ventilation system where actually it is located. So in that case, if you see the ventilation system, it should not be located in a contaminated zone, such as the system, it should not be very close to the kitchen, or where you have the the outer conditions, that is depends upon the locality. Actually the ventilation system, it should be away from the reach of the kitchen and even the latrines, so that the purity of the air, you can enjoy that. So that's what the pointer has to be taken into granted. So next, the systems of the ventilation. So basically the system of the ventilations, they are divided into two categories, that is the natural ventilation, which is also called as the aeration, and the mechanical ventilation or the artificial ventilation. So before that, we in the types of the ventilation, we have different types such as the natural ventilation, the exhaust ventilation, supply ventilation, and the mechanical ventilation. So out of this, we are going to study about the natural ventilation and the mechanical ventilation. So these are the MCQs. For a comfortable working, the dash content should be limited to about 0.6% by the volume. The below are the options. First is oxygen, second is hydrogen, third carbon monoxide, and fourth is the carbon dioxide. So let us see which is the right answer for that. Yeah, carbon dioxide is the right answer. Actually, for the comfortable living conditions, 0.6% carbon dioxide has to be supplied to the room. So these are the references. Thank you.